On their first third down in their preseason Week 2 contest at Seattle, the Chiefs ran a play concept that was a nice wrinkle on something that they do a lot and is really popular across the NFL. So let's take a look at it. The Chiefs come out here lined up in 11 personnel. They've got one running back, Isiah Pacheco, and their tight end is out here on the right. That's Noah Gray. The wide receivers lined up here. This looks like Xavier Worthy, Jalen Royals, and Juju Smith-Schuster. So let's take a look at the play, and then we'll break it down. We've got Minshew in shotgun. He's got 3 wide to the left, and the tight end is over to the right. Juju then motions over to the right to make it a 2x2 set. Minshew takes the snap and swings a quick one out to Isiah Pacheco, who runs down the field for a huge gain, getting a first down on 3rd and about 5. So what is this play concept, and how is it a wrinkle on what we're used to teams seeing? So against man coverage, and some teams run this even against zone, but the Chiefs especially have been very selective about using it against man, and it's really designed as a man-beating coverage, or a man-beating play. Lots of teams run mesh, which I'm sure many people understand the basic concept of mesh is you have crossing routes across the middle. One person oftentimes is supposed to set a pick for another. So the idea is that you have a man running with each of these guys, one man running with this person, one man running for this person, and you might even have a robber in the middle of the field. So hopefully with the two of them crossing, one person is looking to kind of rub, or defenders would say pick, the other guy's man, so that hopefully you can have somebody running free across the field. So lots of variations of mesh that teams like to run, one of which is mesh with a sit route. And so that would be kind of having crossers come across, and then your third guy comes and sits underneath. And so you can read the mesh, and some will teach to read the sit route deep first and then come down to the mesh, or maybe you look at the mesh first and then come to your sit route over the top. So another wrinkle off of this is what they call mesh rail. And so, mesh, you can have like multiple things with the mesh route. It doesn't have to be a sit route. The Chiefs have had other variations. Like they used to have Tyreek Hill run a deep over with mesh. So they would have like this mesh concept, and the other guy would be, Tyreek Hill would be lined up here, actually inside of the mesh concept. So when Juju was back here, what they used to do with Tyreek is they would have mesh here and Tyreek run a deep over across the field. So they actually read the deep over first and then come back down to the mesh. Anyway, the mesh sit is one of the variations, and that I brought it up first because that's what Juju is doing on this play. He's coming and sitting. So they have, this mesh concept and then a sit route over the top. Well, then you have a variation called mesh rail, in which you run mesh, but the nice thing about creating this conflict here and a lot of traffic in the middle to try to make it hard for defenders to run across, oftentimes there's a linebacker in the middle field who's responsible for the running back. So as you're creating traffic, you've got the mesh route and you've got the sit route coming across. You then send the running back out on a rail route. Idea being that it takes a minute for his defender to get out there, and that he can pop right open. If your receivers on this side are coming in this direction, their men are looking inside, so they're not covering the sideline. This guy's trying to get to the sideline, and your rail route can pop open. And so this becomes the first read on a mesh rail. And so the Chiefs are doing a variation of a mesh rail. They're not actually running mesh after all that discussion. They're running pivot routes or whip routes. So I guess people are calling this pivot rail. So it's a variation on that popular mesh rail concept where normally they have the routes coming like this. Well, instead they have pivot routes coming like this, and they've got Pacheco coming out on the rail. And as you can see, Minshew looks over to Pacheco first. That's his first read right there, and you can see why he pops open. We've got man coverage here on Juju's sit route. We've got man coverage on the whip route. And then the man responsible for Pacheco is starting in the middle of the field. And so he's got to navigate this traffic to get out there, and he doesn't in time, which allows Pacheco to get a nice healthy gain after the catch. And so teams also do the timing of this play differently. The Chiefs on this tend to just get the ball out quickly. They want the ball to the receiver with as much open space, especially a guy that has burst like Pacheco does. And boy, does it look like he's got his burst again. If you see him running down the field, it really looks like he's got some juice that he didn't toward the end of last year. In fact, it really reminds me of what he looked like week 1 and early week 2 before he got injured. In fact, let's take a look at that real quick for comparison. So here we are back in week 1 of 2024. We don't have to break down the entire play because that's not the point here. The point is really comparing Pacheco's movement. So if we look at this play, it's not like the mesh rail or the pivot rail we were just talking about. This is more of a kind of deep concept with Pacheco leaking out late. Mahomes finds him on a dump off. But look at Pacheco here on this play. So Mahomes drops the ball, dumps it off to him. He's got to make a man miss and get as much as he can. And just look at the burst that he had. Like this, we didn't see as much later in the year when he came back from injury. He got hurt in week 2. And so seeing that, it really, this mesh rail play that we just broke down really reminds me of Pacheco back then. And man, if Pacheco has the kind of juice that he was displaying before he got injured in week 2 last year, that'll be a huge boost to the explosiveness prospects that the offense has, because as we know, the offense really struggled with explosive plays last year. It would be nice to have the ability to have some of that coming from the running back position this year. But anyway, back to 2025. It really does look like seeing Pacheco make this catch. I mean, I really like the way he's moving, how quickly he's covering ground. We know he kind of runs angrily, as Louis Riddick says he runs typewriter feet, I think is the way he puts it. People say he runs like he's angry at the ground, but it's nice to see that he's covering a lot of ground as well again, and I hope that that's what it looks like as we go through this season. All right, and then there's not as much to look at from the offensive line perspective on this play, just given how quickly the ball came out. But you see Juju run in motion. You see quick sets from the offensive line. Again, not asked to do anything too complicated. Hold up for just a quick drop back. I don't know that there's a ton of note there. I mean, Jalen Moore got moved back, but again, there's not much, we're not, it doesn't look like he was going to be able to re-anchor here, and so had the rail not been open, this might have been problematic, but it was a quick play, not much asked of from the line, and a nice play with that kind of pivot wrinkle on the mesh rail concept.